back, relax, and maybe get yourself a snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hey guys, so I'm here today to review this monster, Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson. This is a huge book, so please excuse me if it wobbles all over the screen because it's really heavy to hold. So, this is book number 3 in the Stormlight Archive series by Brandon Sanderson. I loved book 1 and 2 in this series, so I was hoping and expecting to love book 3. I'm also a big Sanderson fan in general. In fact, I love nearly all of his Cosmere books. However, this book didn't really live up to the hype that I'd built up for it, or the other two in the series, in my opinion. Personally, I felt like I just didn't get as much as I wanted from this book, and it felt like a bit of a filler book to me. That doesn't mean I won't continue with the series, I certainly will, and I still would rate Sanderson as an author that I really enjoy. But this book in particular just didn't grip me anywhere near as much as some of the previous ones in this series. So let's talk about why. On the one hand, we learn an awful lot of plot things in this book, so we do get development of the plot as a whole. But on the other hand, we have a lot of interludes and a lot of sections which feel like they are constantly character developing and politicking. Personally, I like character development. I think it's great to have characters well defined and well developed in your stories, particularly in fantasy when there are so many characters to deal with. But for me, even this got a little bit too heavy in this book, because there are a sheer amount of characters, so many to keep track of. This one feels so much slower and less punchy than usual Sanderson Cosmere stuff to me. I really enjoy the Cosmere. I think it is a great concept to have a universe where you have different planets and can set your characters and plots, but for me this book just didn't have the same punchy excitement factor as the others in the series and the others in his Cosmere worlds, because I think it felt slower. The beginning in particular was so much slower to get going. Although the ending and the second half is very dramatic, very Sanderson-esque, I just feel like the first half wasn't very Sanderson-esque. It felt very slow. Also, one thing that really irritated me, and that is a personal pet peeve of mine, love triangles. Why is there a love triangle? No. Very irritating. Luckily, it's not there for the whole book, but my goodness, is it annoying. I won't say who it is, but if you've read the book and you want to see spoilers, I've done a review which contains spoilers on Goodreads, but they're hidden, so you can click on them if you want to see the spoilers that I wrote as well. This book is Dalinar's story. Dalinar is one of our main characters in the series, and this book is particularly focused on him, like the first book was on Caledon and the second on Shaolin. This book is Dalinar's story. It tells about his past, and it also tells about the present day situation that he and the others around him find themselves in. It's told predominantly in flashbacks and in present day, but there are other characters who we see points of view from too, and a lot of these are major players, but some are minor players at the moment who undoubtedly will become more major players as the story goes on. This book is largely dominated by Dalinar and his actions, and it works really well to show us why Dalinar is the way that he is. By the point that we meet him in the first few books in the series, he's more of an older character, he's very worldly, he's had a lot of experience in battle, and although he was feared throughout the land by many, we don't know exactly how tragic and terrible he's been, but we know it's bad. He's actually thought of now as quite respected, and a lot of people are coming round to see his point of view. At first, when I was reading this, I wasn't so sure on the early days of Dalinar, because Dalinar is heavily involved in campaigns to help his brother rise to the throne. He and his brother and various other soldiers and people who are his friends go on various campaigns and try to take land and conquer it. I am not a fan of battles. This is something I've said many times, so I find it really difficult to get into battle-heavy stories, but I do think, although there are a lot of battles, the emotional sense that we get from Dalinar and the emotions that we see him go through in the heat of those battles is really interesting, and actually gives us a lot of detail about Dalinar himself and his backstory. Why did he become who he is today, which is a very different person from the person who we see in the backstory and the flashbacks, where he is constantly taking command and being a crazy soldier. Why is he so different today? And we learn a lot about that in his backstory. I definitely felt like when his family started getting involved, and it all became a lot more tragic and a lot more heartbreaking and a lot more action-packed. So I really like that section onwards. I feel like the flashbacks we do see are coherent, they're interesting, they give us a layered but intriguing approach to Dalinar, why he has changed his ways so much, so drastically from what he used to be. There's a lot more to the story than just something happened and he changed his ways. There's a lot more to it than that, and we have inklings at this point in the story why, but we don't know exactly why, so it was great to kind of discover more about that and find out exactly how things happened, why things happened, and what was the result of that. Overall, flashbacks were a definite plus, and one of my favourite parts of the book happens in the flashbacks, so I really enjoyed that as a concept, and I think it works really well for character development. Moving on to some of the other characters that we've seen before, and I just need to adjust my hand because it's so heavy. Shaolin up first because I really enjoy her. She's one of my favourite characters, although in this book I didn't like her as much. I feel like in this book Shaolin goes through a bit of a breakdown. Shaolin is a character who is very strong-willed in the first few books, but by this point she's having some serious self-doubt and she's not exactly sure how to overcome this self-doubt. She is someone who is able to draw on different personalities, but what she struggles with in this book is separating them out and deciding who the real Shaolin is. She doesn't exactly understand her place in the world, and she feels a little bit like she's a spare part at times, or doesn't quite know how to fit into the situation she's in. And I really liked that she had this emotional turmoil because I feel like it makes her more human and less of a badass stereotype female character. But I also feel like she has some really silly moments where she's doubting herself and she's being irritating and she just needs to figure it out rather than dwell. I do feel like it is something that Shaolin had to go through to find her true sense of self and her true identity, and I hope that moving forwards, now that we've done that in this book, we can kind of see where she's going to go and what's going to happen to her further. I felt like because she was having such an identity crisis, I didn't connect to her as much in this book as I did in previous books. In previous books I found I could identify with her, but in this book I feel like she was harder to connect to because she was struggling to even connect to herself, if that makes sense. Next up we have Caledon, who again is another character I really enjoy. I do feel like his development in this book was lacking somewhat, but I think in terms of plot he has some really interesting moments, particularly where he goes and spends time with one particular group of people who no one expects him to end up staying with and no one expects him to travel with, but he goes and he spends time with them and he really learns an awful lot about the war and the world and what is going on in it from doing this. I like that a lot as a plot device, and I think it worked really well for Caledon to be the one to go and do this. I don't want to say too much more, but if you've read the book you know which type of people I'm talking about that he spends time with, and I do think it was a crucial part of finding out more so that later in the series we can deal with these people in a different way perhaps. I also do feel like, though he goes off and he has this separate storyline and it's really interesting, I would have liked to see him spend more time with Bridge 4 and his crew. I feel like that's something I love about him in the first few books, and I don't think we see as much of that in this book because he is separated and he is doing his own things by this point. I would have liked to see him just kind of get more involved with the main characters than he did, but I'm hoping that will come in later books. Now we have a couple of different characters, some who are more major and some who are less. I really enjoy Lift and I really enjoy Taravagian. Lift is a character who just shows up at random points and is so energetic and silly and mad. She completely defies everyone's expectations of her and she does what she likes and she doesn't really care, and she's always hungry and she's very sarcastic and very witty, and I really enjoy her sort of fun presence. Taravagian's whole concept is something I still find completely fascinating. He is basically a mad genius. He's been essentially blessed or cursed, I don't know which you'd call it, and he has days where he is completely intelligent. He is able to figure out basically anything in the world. He can come up with hugely complex plans on how to save the world from everything. But then he also has days where he wakes up and he is completely dumb. He is unable to do things. He's unable to do the most basic of tasks, and he cannot function. And it's constantly a battle for him over which one of these personas is going to show up that day and which person he's going to be and how intelligent he's going to be, and whether his less than intelligent self can act on his super intelligent self's ideas and actions, whether they can even comprehend and understand them. It's tricky, but it's a very cool concept. He does do some things in this book which are questionable, and I'm not sure how much I agree with them yet, but I am intrigued by him as a character, and I can't help but find him a really fascinating person as the series goes on. The role he's going to play and what's happening, I find him very intriguing. There were some other characters who I have talked about in my Goodreads review under the spoiler tags, but I can't talk about here because it massively spoils some things. One of the characters is a character who crosses over from Warbreaker, and I absolutely loved seeing that character come into the story. We also have some other crossover with that book, and I love it. That's all I'm going to say about that book, because I don't want to spoil who the character is for you and how it gets revealed who they are later on. But my goodness, it was a great reveal and I loved it, and I'm super happy that Warbreaker and this series are starting to cross over a lot more. It does seem like this series is going to be one of the most heavily involved Cosmere books, where people are more aware that the Cosmere exists and people are more aware that there are people who come from other planets and distant worlds. It's very interesting because one of the main characters that Sanderson inserts into a lot of his Cosmere books is called Hoyd, and Hoyd is said to be this sort of world hopper who can go between different planets and timelines and just shows up where he is needed. He doesn't always know why he is needed or what he's supposed to do when he gets there, but he always turns up at interesting moments, and we see quite a few conversations between him and also Shaolin in this book, and a couple of other situations where Hoyd shows up in a different guise, and I really find him so fascinating. He comes out with some of the best lines, he comes out with some of the best moments, and he's always there when interesting things are going on. So I find him fascinating, and I loved that part of the book. I found all of his scenes great. Like I say, there are other characters who are so worth talking about, but without giving spoilers away, I can't really do that. So let's move on. The plot in this one is very politically motivated because by this point in the series, we are threatened with an ongoing war, and we're threatened with the desolation of the world. It's pretty high stakes. So we are following Dalinar and a couple of other leaders of different parts of the world as they are trying to communicate with one another and try and see if there is any way for them to cooperate together and unlock the different portals of this world, which will allow them to communicate and jump between places and hopefully start to defend against the enemy which is coming for them. There are a lot of political and battle-heavy moments in this book, and for me, those are some of the things I most struggle with in fantasy books. I do not personally like politics or battles myself. I find them quite dull, and I don't think any author would be able to do it in a way that I find fascinating, but at least Sanderson keeps it to a minimum where possible. The magic in this world is super interesting. There are so many different techniques and styles, and Sanderson's come up with a really intriguing system for how it all links together. We get some really cool scenes where a group of the characters go into an alternate world and they end up travelling through this world, and it's so magical and so interesting to see the opposite side of this world. We also get Spren in this world, who are kind of magical beings, and they can do things and influence things in interesting ways. They all originate from a source of magic, which we are finding out a lot more about as the story goes on. And I'm really excited to sort of see more and more of the magic being unlocked and discovered and explained in this story, because I do think that is one of the things that Sanderson does best, is magic systems, making new ones and interesting ones, and just generally being really cool. I do think the magic was great in this. We do learn a lot more than we knew, and I'm really happy about that. So magic, that was a good tick for me. I really like that. On the whole, I still really enjoyed this book. I do think it's a very solid read. It's very likeable and enjoyable. It just had some more draggy bits and was a lot more political for me personally. That's a bit of a drain on my attention span, and I didn't love it. However, it is in the world that I love. It follows many of the characters that I find fascinating. The story as a whole has moved on over the course of the book, although less than I would have hoped. So I'm thinking that as the story continues, we're going to get into some really cool parts of the world and see some really fascinating things go on. I will continue on with the series, but for me personally, this one is the weakest in the series so far, and I only gave it a 3.5 because although I liked it, I definitely didn't really like or love it. So it was good, it was interesting, but it wasn't my favourite. I'd love to hear what you guys think in the comments below, because I know a lot of people have been giving this 5 stars, a lot of people absolutely love Sanderson. For me, it just wasn't the one, guys. It just really didn't capture my attention in the same way as the previous 2. I'm hoping whoever we focus on book 4 is a little less battle focused. Maybe that will be a solution for me. I don't know, but I'm really excited to see where the series goes, and I would really love to hear your thoughts. So thank you all for watching. Don't forget, if you have read the book, you can read my spoilery review on Goodreads. I'll link it below, and I will see you all very soon in my next video. Bye guys! Yes, finally put it down. Oh, my hand. Ah! Oh god, it hurts. Oh god. Ah. Injured from the book review.
Thank you for watching my video today. Go pick up a book, then come back and chat with me again.